You're listening to the Humbucker Soup podcast with Kevin Chisholm. If you love guitar pickups, pedals, and parts, you've come to the right place. So sit back and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to Humbucker Soup. We're with Chris Charles today. Chris is the founder of Resistance Pickups, which manufactures boutique, hand-wound guitar pickups, ranging from vintage single coils to high-output metal humbuckers. Every pickup has at least a few thousand turns of wire, but in Chris's case, he's also putting years of stage experience into every one of his products, as he's also a guitarist in the band Blind River. Welcome to Humbucker Soup, Chris, and thank you for joining us today.
No worries, Kevin. It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Chris. You know, I find it interesting that you are a hard rock guitarist, yet some of your products are vintage-based. The Texas Tank, the Stashbucker, and I think the Crystal 57s.
Yeah.
So does Resistance Pickups product range reflect your personal taste in music or a desire to attract a broad range of customers?
I'd say it's a bit of both, really.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously, when you start making pickups, the first thing you want to do is create a pickup that you think sounds good. So, and it's kind of exciting because you kind of think, well, I can just print my favorite pickups over and over again for my own guitars. But if I did that, I wouldn't get anywhere because I'd just be making myself pickups and not for other people.
Right.
But I think, like, not only just from playing, but coming from a tech background and having techs for lots of different bands and having worked in different shops and also worked for guitar companies, it kind of, you kind of have to broaden your horizons and cater for everyone.
Sure.
Because, you know, the vast majority of people that would bring me their guitars for a refret or for, you know, a new pickup or, you know, just a setup, they wouldn't necessarily be a hard rock guitarist or a metal guitarist. Yeah. They might be a jazz guitarist. They might be, you know, a funk guitarist, that kind of thing. So,
sure.
So, yeah, it's just kind of wanting to make great sounding pickups that can be used in all applications.
Of course. And when you're trying out your pickups, when you've built a pickup and you're trying one out, of course, being that you are more of a hard rock player, if it's a heavier pickup, I'm sure that's a lot of fun. But if you just built one of your Texas Tank single coils, do you still enjoy testing that one and playing it through your Strat and cranking it out?
Texas Tank, yes, definitely. Because I love kind of Texas blues playing and I love funk playing as well. So that's kind of something that I really do enjoy. But I kind of get what you're saying there. There's a couple of pickups where I've played them and gone, well, I can't use this. But the Crystal 57 being one of them.
Okay.
I played it and I thought, man, this is great. This sounds, you know, it kind of hit the nail on the head with the tone I was going for with that pickup.
Yeah.
But completely unusable for me.
Right.
So
not
I had
your
it
personal style.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that was kind of odd because I was like, you know, it was a lot of trial and error, and I eventually got there, and I was like, right, I've hit the nail on the head now, but I can't use it.
By the way, where did you get the name Texas Tank? That's a great one.
I got it from literally just trying to think of like cool names for pickups, and I thought, well, it's essentially it's for that kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan Texas blues type thing.
Yep.
And I thought, you know, it's got a bit more. It's got a bit more to it. It's a bit more powerful. So I thought, well, what's something that's on steroids? I thought a tank.
That's great. Now, the Stashbucker was created for guitarist Kyle McNeil of Seven Sisters.
Yes.
So how did this come about? What's the relationship there?
Okay, so Kyle, I met Kyle because I was working as a freelance tech for several different shops, and one of them was the Camden store of Guitar in the UK, which is like a guitar chain. A friend of mine, Nick, who used to work for Gibson, he became the manager there, and they needed a tech for you know, a day here and there just to help them out with some setups and a few repairs and stuff. So I met Carl when I was there, and after we both it's kind of, I went off on tour with a couple of bands, and I actually bumped into Carl somewhere in, I think it was Barcelona. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, but yeah, we started talking about pickups, and he was asking about them, saying, what are you doing, kind of thing, and he got intrigued, and he came to me and said, I've got this Huber guitar, which is like a German bespoke guitar, and he found that the bridge pickup was a bit mid-heavy, kind of probably like the Crystal 57. Like, he couldn't use it in a power metal band, and he needed something that just had a bit more power but still sounded natural. Okay. And he described it really well, and then I just kind of few goes, and I came up with it. So yeah.
And that one, the Stashbucker, it's correct me if I'm wrong, it's a PAF, but it has a reduced mid bump.
Yeah.
So from a technical perspective, just curious, how do you reduce the mids on a humbucker? What's the technical approach to that?
Okay, so there's a lot to go into with that. So it's down to using different magnets. I mean, you could use like ceramics or something to bring the mids down, because they're kind of naturally scooped. Okay. But that's not what I did with this one. So with this one, I actually used much thinner wire, because I find that the thinner gauge copper wire for the actual pickup windings can have almost a more modern compressed sound when wound at a higher tension. So I mean, but my pickups are literally made by hand. So I do have a tensioner, and I have used it, but I didn't get the results I wanted. So when I actually wind it by hand, I pull slightly harder on the on the wire, not too hard to break it, and then used I think it's an Alnico 5 in the Stashbucker.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the winding process. I wanted to ask you if you use different kinds of winding machines for different kinds of pickups, or do you have one winder that you use for all your pickups?
I have one winder.
Okay. Yeah, and is the winding process kind of a set it and forget it kind of thing, where you punch the numbers in and just let it go, or is that too simplistic? Is it a combination of the machine process, but a human has to do it? A human has to make decisions and know when to stop it or slow it down.
It's funny you say that, because the machine I've got, you can actually program the number of winds into the machine. So I can program in all the winds, and if I use the tensioner, I could, because I don't actually do this, but I could set it and just have it tension it, and I could leave the machine, and I could prep the wires, and I could, send the customer an email. I could leave the machine to do its business, but that's not how I make them. I specifically do them by hand. So I literally hold the wire, guide the wire on by hand. And because I'm doing that, I actually control the machine as well. So I haven't stored the number of winds. So in answer to your question, it's human. So so I have a black book that I've written all the different winding amounts, the direction of the coils, as in, is it counterclockwise or is it clockwise? So I kind of have the specs of the pickups. It's like a recipe book almost, and then I just go to the right pickup, find what the specs are, pull all the stuff out, and then guide it on by hand.
So that's your little black book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, 30 Seconds with Ed.
Hello, my name is Ed Malaker, and in the next 30 seconds I will explain the difference between a soldering iron and a soldering gun. While many people may use these terms interchangeably, they are very different tools, and one can cause permanent damage to your guitar. We recommend using a soldering iron. These are long and thin, not much different from an ink pen. You plug these in and they get hot, so you will need to set it in a base and be careful to unplug it when you finish. A soldering gun, as the name suggests, has a shape that resembles a pistol. This tool usually has a large wire tip that is too large for your guitar cavity. It only gets hot when you squeeze the trigger, but the internal components that cause the rapid increase in temperature can alter your pickup's magnetic field, permanently changing their sound. Stick to a soldering iron for guitar repairs.
So speaking of winding, and you mentioned winding patterns, I was curious about the Crystal 57s because they use a scatter pattern.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could explain to our listeners what a scatter pattern is and how it affects the sound of the pickup.
So essentially it literally means that it's scattered, so the wire isn't even.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain degree, all hand wound pickups are scatter wound,
Mm-hmm.
and you will get varying differences between hand wound pickups. And you can program a machine to scatter wound.
Mm-hmm.
You could program a machine to scatter wound nearly exactly, but every time the wire crosses over, it's creating different spaces between the wires.
Okay.
So therefore, when the actual flow of the current goes through, you get differences in how that responds and how that transfers into the overall sound of the pickup.
Okay.
So scatter wound tends to have tends to sound more open and a bit more natural. What you can do, and what I do with some pickups, is try and wind it exactly next to each other, which is nearly impossible. But if you concentrate really hard as you're putting the wire across, you can get the wires to line up pretty neatly, and that can give you a slightly different tone to if you then wound exactly the same pickup with the same specs, but moved your hand from side to side and scattered across the actual bobbin itself.
Okay. So, and these are things that you can learn about listening to an interview like this, or you can read about. But from a realistic standpoint, how long did it take you to really get these techniques down? And as you've learned, have you wound up with a pile of half wound pickups? Because at some point you kind of say, oh, I messed this one up. I got to start over.
Yeah. All I can say is if anyone's actually listening and they want to wind pickups, you need a lot of patience. And it is, well, I think you'd have to be a superhuman not to find it frustrating, because the actual wire is like a human hair. So, you're running a wire, this tiny thin copper wire off a spool that's on the ground or just off to the side, and then you're winding it onto a machine that's pulling it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you have to tension it, and you can use a machine to tension it. You can use a hand tensioner, or you can use your fingers. But it's really easy to break the wire. And I mean, I sat there for hours. I think it took me. I took some time off work to do it. So I thought I need to learn this, and I'm going to focus on this. I think it was around 2 weeks to actually wind my first pickup without breaking the wire.
2 weeks of trial and error.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like, I think maybe I'd like work a half day doing guitar repairs, and then I'd go and, spend 4 or 5 hours doing pickups. But it turned into, when I remember some nights I'd be there and it would be like 10, 11 o'clock. I'd not eaten, and I'd be there with this tiny human hair bit of copper, and I'd be cutting it, or maybe I pulled it too tight and the tension had caused the wire to short somewhere. That's really annoying. So when you build a pickup, I had a few humbuckers where I put them together and then they just wouldn't work.
Wow.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking backwards a bit, what were your beginnings as a guitarist? What led you to the instrument?
I actually grew up in a musical family. So my dad played guitar, and one of my uncles played guitar. And my family, my mum's side especially, would dance and sing a lot when I was a kid. So like I kind of had that installed, like music installed in me very young.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in like a duo with one of his friends as well. Okay. So I used to go and sit with them while they played guitar, and eventually I picked up a few bass lines, and then went from when I was young, like 7, and then started playing. I played cello for a bit, and then I played classical guitar, and that's how that really happened.
So when you started playing electric guitar, did you play in bands and perform live as a young guy?
Yeah. So the first band I was in was when I was 14. So that was just a punk band. That was a punk band called the Bodily Fluids.
Okay, that's a name.
For 14-year-olds. Yeah, we thought that was cool. We're into like the Sex Pistols and like Buzzcocks and that kind of punk. So yeah, I was heavily into like blues though.
Okay.
Like Jimi Hendrix was probably the first big inspiration on guitar, and I'd learned how to strum a lot of stuff just by sitting with my dad and his friend. Learned how to play like 100 Beatles songs or however many songs they've got.
Okay. So when you were at that particular period of time, were you also interested in the various moving parts of the guitar? Were you kind of curious about that part, or did that come later in your life?
I was definitely curious about it, but I didn't take a guitar apart until I was 16 or 17. I actually visited my cousins in Virginia, and I hadn't seen them for about 10 years. And I bought a DiMarzio Super Distortion, and I fitted it in my uncle and aunt's house in their garage.
Okay.
So I fitted it there in Virginia. So that was my first experience of. That was my first experience of changing a pickup. I think I'd opened a guitar before and played around and moved the wires and played with a soldering iron, that kind of thing. Okay.
So then as a working guitarist, you eventually landed endorsements with Matrix amplification, bare knuckle pickups, and roto sound strings. So wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about each of those relationships and how the endorsement came about.
So roto sounds and bare knuckle kind of came together, really, because I joined a band. I was in a band called Kamikaze Test Pilots.
That's a great name.
Yeah,
you're 2 for 2 in this interview, Chris.
Yeah, they're a brilliant band, actually. They're still going, and but I left them and I joined a band called God-Sized, and I'd actually been teching for God-Sized, so like their guitarist left and I was there, so I ended up joining, but they all had endorsements with Rotor Sound and bare knuckle. So I just kind of got in contact with the companies and said, I'm the new guitarist, will that endorsement apply to me? And it did. Which was cool. So So that's how they came about. But both those companies are really, really good. They're what's the way to say it? They're just really easy to deal with. So if you have any questions or you need to get stuff, you can just kind of email and get a response pretty quickly.
Yeah,
which is important, especially if you're touring and you need strings on the road, or if your pickup's broken, you need to pick up quickly. So,
so jumping to the present, tell us if you could a little bit about your band, Dark River.
Blind River.
Oh, I'm sorry, Blind River. I'm sorry about that.
No worries, man. Blind River is that came about because God-Sized was kind of over, and I was jamming with a friend of mine called Dan Edwards, who's the other guitarist in Blind River, and he'd approached me. There's 100 band names are coming out now, but he approached me at a gig that we're playing with another band I was in called Owl's Ear, and with his band called Sons of Merrick. And we played this gig, and Dan came up to me and said, do you want to kind of put some kind of band together or something? So we started jamming, started throwing some tunes together, and then it started to sound pretty good. So then we started searching around for people. So we got a guy called Andrew Essen on drums, who had actually played in God-Sized, but not at the same time as me. So we played in the same band, but not at the same time. And then we got a friend of mine, Will Hughes, who was in Owl's Ear and several other bands. he joined on bass. Then we got Harry Armstrong, who was in the Earls of Mars.
Mm-hmm.
We got him on vocals, and that kind of put the band together.
Okay. And it sounds like, based on, I looked at your Facebook page, that you guys have done quite a bit of live playing, a little bit of traveling.
Yeah.
Okay. And it seems like you've also done quite a bit of live shows doing festivals, so some pretty big audiences.
Yeah, we were lucky because we'd all been in bands on the kind of underground circuit anyway. So when we kind of joined together, we all had a lot of contacts. So we kind of brought that together. Mm-hmm. And so when we started releasing music, we could then kind of email all the people we know and say, this is the new band. It's got members of these bands. You booked my old band, and at this time in this guy's band. And we kind of pulled together and kind of used the contacts to our advantage, which was really good. It did help that we all have a lot of fun in the band, and we all really enjoy playing. I think that's a big bonus, because it's just,
if you don't have that, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. But we've got a really cool thing at the moment. Actually, I know we're talking about music now and not pickups, but we're working with a company called Route One Booking, who are a new booking agency in the UK. And we should be doing a tour in May, a socially distanced tour with a band called King Creature.
Oh, great!
Which will be good. So that should be kicking off in May.
Oh, it's good to start hearing that word again.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Level Up with Tyler Connaghan.
What's going on, everyone? Today, I want to talk to you guys about adding depth and distance to your guitar recordings with room microphones. Beyond sticking a microphone on the grill of your amplifier to capture the direct tone, you might consider placing a microphone somewhere in the room to capture some additional space. This technique is very similar to adding reverb to your recordings, though it creates a much more natural tone. Now, instead of using a classic dynamic microphone for capturing your room tones, such as a Shure SM57 or Sennheiser 421, you might want to instead consider using a large diaphragm condenser microphone, such as an Audio-Technica AT2020 or a Neumann U87, as these kinds of microphones will pick up the full spectrum of your room tone. I tend to set my room microphone back at least 5 feet. Often I will turn up the amp a bit louder when using a room microphone to let the sound resonate within the room. Now, when it comes to mixing the room microphone and the direct microphone, I'll often pan them to opposite sides of the mix to expand the guitar soundstage. I would highly recommend trying to compress the room mic too, as it can make the sound even bigger and beefier. All right, guys, there you have it. Another segment of
Level Up with Tyler Connaghan.
So at some point as a working musician in the past, you had built up a side business as a guitar technician. So how did that transition happen?
Probably from obviously taking apart my own guitars and fixing them, and then getting jobs in music shops. Mm-hmm. So like one of my first or second jobs was working in a music shop, and it was a classical music shop. Mm-hmm. They had a few electrics, but I had to learn how to set up the violins and the cellos and the classical guitars and the bass guitars and that kind of thing. So I learned basic setup skills. Then I had to learn how to fix my own guitars, because at that time I was gigging a Strat copy, and I was gigging a bolt-on neck Epiphone Les Paul that I got for 50 quid. And I put a Duncan distortion in that.
Does Epiphone have bolt-on necks? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Neither did I until I bought it.
It's great.
I've still got it. I sanded it and sprayed it black.
Okay.
So, it's kicking around somewhere. But so I kind of learned those basic skills over time. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up working for a really good guitar shop called Guitar Village in the UK, and learning a bit more and becoming their actual kind of main tech. Mm-hmm. And it was just a progression. So it was just kind of, as a musician, okay, gigs aren't aren't paying a lot because you're trying to do original stuff. So you end up finding other things that you can make money in within music, and taking guitars apart and fixing them seemed like a good option.
And at one point, you were working for Aria Guitars. Is that correct?
Yeah, Aria guitars and Fibonacci guitars.
Okay, and was that doing guitar technician work? Same type of work?
Yeah, for Aria, it was a lot of kind of basic setups before they go out to the shops. A few fret dresses here and there.
Okay.
Checking the electrics, that kind of thing. But for Fibonacci, it was laying the frets in, profiling the necks, doing the bone nuts, building the wiring looms, profiling bridges. That so they do arch tops, primarily jazz arch tops.
Okay.
So it was a bit more in depth there.
Did you actually formally study guitar repair? Because you're mentioning things that are not easy to learn on your own.
Yeah, I did. I did a night course as a college called Merton College.
Okay.
So I went there. I actually did 2 nights a week. So Monday night and Wednesday night, I'd go to this college and do a 4-hour course.
Okay.
I did one course with them in guitar electronics, which was literally how to build a circuit from scratch. So which was actually really cool. I didn't expect it to be that good. So we started with a very basic pickup, and then we did a pickup straight to a volume control. Then we did a pickup straight to an output jack. Then we did a pickup with a volume to an output jack. Then we did a pickup, to a volume and a tone with an output jack. Then we added another pickup, and then we added, I think maybe a treble bleed, and then we added switches. So we literally started with 2 components and then built it up to Jimmy Page wiring, and then. So
it's like you started with the most pure aspect of it, the pickup, the amp, and then you backed up introducing more of the typical elements of a guitar. Yeah,
and that was actually invaluable because my soldering was awful. I think a lot of people soldering is a bad thing.
I'm one.
Yeah.
I just, if it works, I'm happy, right?
Yeah, because you just kind of jam it on there.
Yeah,
and then it gets messy, and you don't want to hold it for too long, or you might burn the pot and that kind of thing. But that particular course showed me how to solder properly, which was probably the most valuable part of it. How to tin wires, how to clean the solder off. So if anyone's listening, buy a solder sucker and learn how to solder properly.
Okay, what is it called again? A solder sucker?
Yeah. Okay. So it's just a little kind of pressure chamber that allows you to pull the hot excess solder off the instrument. Literally just you press it and it sucks it up.
I've never heard of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you also recommend a flux pen? Is that something people should use generally, where you put the flux on before you solder?
Yeah. People do use that. I don't, but yeah.
So I was going to ask you if you what your feelings were about the school that you went to, but it sounds like a ringing endorsement. I mean, it sounds like you had a good experience at this school.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good because on the flip side of that, I also did guitar building there. So I learned how to lay frets, how to route pickup cavities, and actually build an instrument. So I learned those skills there. But because it was in the evenings, you couldn't get the full benefit as if you were there every day. Yeah. But then when I ended up working for shops and working for guitar companies, I could then hone the skills, there in the real world, so to speak.
Sure. And it's interesting you mentioned fretting because, that's pretty much where I stop, is fretting and cutting nuts. I do pretty much everything for myself because I can figure out how to do it, but I'm not particularly great at it. I just get it to work. But fretting to me is something that's just beyond comprehension because you can't be sloppy. I mean, you could be sloppy when you solder and it will work. It's just but you cannot be sloppy when you do fret work, and that's really amazing to me. People who do fret work and that you were able to learn that and do it professionally is really impressive.
It's another thing like building pickups. You have to have patience. So in fact, I've literally just refretted a Strat for a friend of mine. So brought that to me, and that was 9.5 radius, and I reprofiled it to a 12-inch radius and put new frets in.
So if you're going to reprofile a neck radius, do you literally have like a sanding block that's shaped to that radius? Is that really what it comes down to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just buy the sanding block and then sand it down. Make sure the neck's straight first.
Okay, so it is possible to change the radius of a neck. If I have a neck that's a 7 1/4 inch radius, you could change it to a 12 if I asked you to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That particular change, you need to check the actual depth of how much you've got of that board, because some boards can be thinner. So you'd want to check that first, but providing there's enough meat on the actual fretboard itself to take it down that far, that's
yep.
Totally
but you can't really go back. You can't go back and forth, right? Because if I give you a 7 1/4 and you go take it to 12, and that works great, and then I say, you know what, I want to go back to 7 1/4. There's just not enough wood, right?
No.
Yeah.
You'll run into problems doing that.
Okay. So just one thing I wanted to ask you, if one of our listeners is hearing this and thinking, hey, I'd love to be, a guitar technician, what would be your advice about starting cold? What's the first few steps you should take?
Probably something like learn to solder. That would be like learn to solder properly.
Okay.
So get the right tools and learn to do that. Learn to set up. In fact, probably go back a step. Right, learning to solder properly is invaluable, but definitely if you're going to wind pickups. But learn to set up properly first.
Okay.
And don't go for all these myths. Like you see people picking up guitars and like looking down guitars to check if the neck's bowed, and that's fine to check if it's bowed or to see if there's any wonky frets. But when you're actually setting it up, you want to make sure you're doing it properly and you get the right relief in the neck. You can do it by eye and feel. That's absolutely fine. But I think if you're going to do it professionally, or at least working in a shop, then you want to do it to the numbers in the correct settings.
Okay.
Because then it's kind of got your back as well. So if you do have any issues with customers, kind of talking real world situations, you can put it right to the numbers, and then you can drop it down lower if they need it, or you can raise it up higher, but it gives you a good kind of base to work with.
Okay. I mean, I have a shop very close to me that I found a couple of years ago that I'm really in love with. So I bring my guitars there a lot, again, mostly for fretwork and setups and things like that. But the one thing I always notice, because I'm basically a hack, I do all this stuff myself, but I'm not a professional guitar technician or luthier. So I'm always watching, I'm always paying attention. And the first thing I really noticed when I started going there a lot is, wow, he's got a tool for everything. And a light bulb kind of went off in my head, is like, yes, because he's a professional. So you should have the right tools and know when and how to use them. Yeah.
In fact, so going on from that, a friend of mine asked me the other day. He was like, "What do you recommend as a toolkit?" So I found him a link to a couple of toolkits, and that's probably the best thing to do, is to buy a decent toolkit. So don't buy I'm going to say $1 one. Don't buy a $12 kit from Amazon. Get yourself a $50 Cruise Tool kit. I think it's Cruise Tool or Groove Tech. I think they make decent tools. And I bought one of those ages ago, and that's lasted. And the tools are precise, so you can do a much better job. And little things matter. So like, you want to make sure that the Allen keys you're using are good quality, so they don't mess up someone's truss rod. Someone brings you a vintage guitar, and you're going into that vintage truss rod with a grubby old Allen key, or a cheap one that's got rough edges, and you mess that up, then that's your responsibility.
So, for example, could you wind up stripping the female part of the truss rod because you have a bad male Allen key?
Yeah.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
It's like a lot of cheap tools will have that. Or a great example is radius gauges. So you can get a £7 or $7 set of radius gauges from Amazon, and they'll be sharp. So if you do check, use them for something simple like checking the radius on a fretboard, because you might look at it and you might be like, I actually don't know what this is, and you put it on there, you might end up scratching the fretboard.
If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, then head over to humbuckersoup.com for deeper dives from our experts to guide you in your pursuit of the ultimate guitar tone. Once again, that's humbuckersoup.com. See you there.
This is Ed Malaker, Humbucker Soup's electronic wizard. Do your vintage Strat pickups hum relentlessly? Stumped on how to wire up volume and tone controls? Don't know the difference between a double pull, double throw, and a push-pull pot? Then ask Humbucker Soup. Send your questions to askhbs@humbuckersoup, all one word, .com. And maybe we'll answer your questions on the podcast. If we do, we'll send you a Humbucker Soup t-shirt. What could be cooler than that? This is Ed Malaker, and I approve this message.
So mentioning fretwork, when you do a fret job, do you do everything by hand, or do you have access to a PLEK machine?
No, I do it by hand.
Okay, that's got to be a lot of work.
It is. It's more work than people realise. I think when they're like, "Oh, can you refret my guitar?" I think it's just pull the frets out, put them in, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more work.
Do you have any strong opinions about PLEK machines? Do you think that they're a very useful tool for the right circumstance, or do you think it removes too much of the human element?
I actually have a guitar that I got recently that's had a PLEK setup, and it was refretted at a shop that has a PLEK machine, and they used it on that guitar, and it plays great. It feels great. Okay. But in my honest opinion, it doesn't play any better than a person doing it, than a human actually doing it. And the Strat I've just refretted feels better to me than the Les Paul that had the PLEK machine.
Interesting.
So, yeah, whether it's just the neck profiles and the fret wires are slightly different shapes, so it could be that in there. But I think it's just some guitars feel great, others don't. But as long as the fret dress is good, I don't think it matters whether it's on a PLEK machine or a person.
Now, if you're a guitar luthier, it seems to me, at least in the United States, that the kind of Home Depot for guitar luthiers is StewMac. That's a big one. Would a guitar luthier in the United Kingdom also use StewMac, or do you guys kind of have another company like StewMac in your area that provides the same kind of tools and supplies for guitar luthiers?
There are actually quite a few.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I use a whole load of different suppliers for everything. So for pickup parts, I use different suppliers for different pickups. Okay. I spent ages trying to research, the different kits. So I ended up buying different kits from different people, then realizing I didn't want it in kits. So I wanted this particular base plate with these bobbins and these particular magnets and that kind of thing. So that comes from a whole host of different people. For tools, sometimes I buy them from StewMac because StewMac tools are really good. Okay.
So I'm asking you straight out. So StewMac's tools are good in your opinion?
Yeah, okay. Definitely. I think there's a few on there where you can find very similar quality ones that are almost the same, but definitely their files are really good.
Yeah, I actually was impressed. I emailed them a couple of days ago about, I think, a countersink bit for tuning machine holes, and they got back to me pretty quick. It was good information. It was good email, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. They've got every question covered.
Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't the first person to ask that question, but they were they were quick and they were helpful. Yeah. But do you find, based on your professional experience, that some suppliers maybe do kind of do it all. Like I think with Stu Mac, you could literally buy a drill bit, or you could buy a Mojo winding machine, or some suppliers really specialize in things like magnets or pickup covers or tools. Do you find that the suppliers who specialize kind of have better stuff, and the ones who do the whole range, it's like, you're pretty good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing? Or does it really just depend on the company?
I think it depends on the company. So there are some, I won't name them, but there are a couple of people in the UK who do really good stuff, and it's all good quality. Mm-hmm. And you pay the price for it. There's a particularly good guy who I will name called Chris Alsop, who actually makes handmade tools. And if anyone's listening in the UK and you're a luthier, he's really good. I use his tools because they just feel so good when you use them, and they're actually really reasonably priced. Wow. And he's at home, he's making them by hand. So you're buying handmade tools to do your handmade, to do your fretwork and that kind of thing, which I like. Okay. But then there's some people who sell all the same or very similar luthier tools, and they're not very good quality. Okay. Which you need to steer away from. So I think you need to do your research when you look at tools.
Got it.
And don't skimp.
Okay, so you're on stage, you're all tuned up, your amps off standby, and you're ready to light some faces up. Time to start the gig. You hit the first chord, but your guitar has other ideas. What is going on? Why are you battling a guitar to stay in tune? I'm here to help.
Joe Boult, Guitar 911.
From the bedroom shredder to the arena filler, we've all dealt with at least one guitar that's just happier being out of tune. Let's talk about some things that might be the issue and how you can rectify them. First step, check your string travel. If you've got a 3-side tuner system and the strings leave the nut at a sideways angle, more than likely this is causing binding at the nut, and this causes the string to hold tension because it isn't travelling through properly. When the tension releases, you go out of tune. The solution to this, any product like a string butler, which brings the strings out at a straight angle and bends them to the tuner with a roller mechanism, so the string travels with no friction. If you're still having problems, then you could just have a bad nut. How do you tell this? Well, if you've ever tuned your guitar, nothing happens, and then ping, the string is suddenly sharper, you've got nut binding. The right material is key. And if you've got a cheap plastic nut on a budget guitar, you want to get that swapped as fast as possible. You could also buy a self-lubricating nut to help remedy this, or even something like a contact lubricant like Big Ben's Nut Sauce. Following this idea, it could be your saddles. Strings travel over the saddles at an angle, and while it's not likely to be the issue, cheaper saddles made out of stamped steel will rub away with friction. This can definitely be the cause of string binding, or even in some extreme cases, be a string snapper. Always pay attention to where your strings snap, because if you habitually get breaks at the saddle, you've probably got a duff saddle. Always lube your saddle along with your nut. What do you mean you're calling HR? You can also buy self-lubricating saddles if you keep snapping strings and need a new one. If you're still having trouble, well, here's a big one. Stretch your strings when you change them. See, once you've tuned a brand new string up, it's not completely stretched all the way out. It's going to keep stretching, and this causes them to go out of tune a lot. So, run your thumb underneath the string across the full length, bending it with your 2 fingers. You're not looking to kink the string or bend it, but just to get all of that stretch out of it. Retune the string and repeat until the string stays in tune after being stretched. And make sure you don't forget to stretch behind the nut. Finally, whammy bar users, this one's for you. If you have a 2-point tremolo, then take a look at the knife edges where the bridge rests at the posts. These have to be sharp. If they're dulled, then the bridge will not return to 0 point. Bridges with cheaper materials will wear away quicker, and while you can sharpen these back up, you've started a time bomb where eventually you're gonna need a new bridge. Licensed floating tremolos have a bad rep for this exact reason, with a couple of obvious exceptions like Ibanez's Edge system. If you're still having problems, nothing beats an experienced luthier, and while I'm sure your mate watching YouTube videos means well, they will not get the job done as well. Good luthiers cost good money, but consider it an insurance policy, knowing you're getting exactly what your guitar needs every time. You wouldn't take your dog to a cheap vet, so don't sell man's second best friend short. Until next time, I'm Joe Boult from Humbucker Soup, and I'll see you about.
So at some point, you made the transition from being a guitar technician to a pickup winder. So what was it that triggered that event? What kind of led you from guitar tech work to pickup winding?
That was a bit of a funny one, actually, because it wasn't directly from guitar teching. So obviously I wanted to learn how to make pickups. That was something that I wanted to do for a long time and I was interested in. And I owned loads of different aftermarket pickups.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talk for hours about them with other guitar nerds, that kind of thing.
So I'm not the only person that has like lots of those little boxes lying around in their bedroom.
Yeah, I had loads of them. I had yeah, just trying out loads of different sets in my Les Paul and my Strat, and which was great. It's great fun.
Yeah.
And obviously working in guitar shops, it's kind of good because you can then sell the pickups.
Yeah.
But I was working for a company who were supplying vehicles to the music industry, so like tour vehicles.
Okay.
And they actually had to shut their office, so it left me without a job. And I thought, you know what? I was kind of splitting my time between teching and working there. I thought, you know what? If I actually learn how to wind pickups now, which is something I wanted to do for ages, I can add that to my bow and kind of add it to my tech business and grow that up. So it kind of happened from there, really.
Okay.
It's a whole load of different things happening at once that kind of led me to it.
Sure. So when it comes to resistance pickups, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Chris.
Yeah.
What is it about resistance pickups that's special? Why resistance? Why not Seymour Duncan, or why not DiMarzio?
Well, mine are hand wound in the case of those two guys, unless you go for the Seymour Duncan Antiquities.
Right.
But I mean, really, it's a small company, and it's me winding the pickups.
Okay.
Maybe it might grow, and I'll get a couple of my tech friends who are showing some interest. Maybe I'll get some of them into wind pickups, or if I go off on tour, I'll teach some people how to do it. But for now, I've literally developed each pickup, and I've got it sounding how I wanted it to sound for that application, and then I wind it by hand. So if someone wants to pick up, and they say, "Hey man, I want a stash bucker," I then build them the stash bucker for their guitar, and it's directly me to the customer. I wind their pickup, and they get it.
So you don't, when you have spare time, you don't make 20 stash buckers, and then that way when somebody contacts you, you could literally toss an envelope and mail it to them. Is it that every order is made for the person who requests it?
Yeah. I have occasionally made a batch. So, for instance, I'm going to make a new one that's not on the site yet called a Fat Staggered, which is a 1/4-inch pole single coil pickup.
Okay.
And I mean, it's insane. It took a few goes to get right, and it sounded awful. So, I mean, that's one thing as well. Like, I won't just make a pickup. You have to research and develop it, and you have to keep trying it out.
Yep.
And essentially, it's a single call, and it's a proper single call, and it sounds ridiculously powerful.
Wow. Okay.
But I'm making one of those for a guy. I'm putting on all new hardware to his guitar, fitting a roller nut, and I'm making that for the bridge of his Strat. And I'm going to make 3, when I do it, and just make a batch for 3. So I'll do that, and then I'll have a couple waiting aside, but I won't sit there and make 20.
Okay. And is that when somebody orders a pickup, like a Crystal 57, can they say, I want it wax potted, or I want, raw nickel covers? Do they have those options to them?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Okay. So do you also do wax potting as a service? If somebody wanted to send you a pickup and say, it's squealing, can I have it wax potted? Do you do that as well?
Yeah. I do wax potting, rewinds. I've rewound some pickups recently for someone. I get quite a lot of that, actually. People have got an old humbucker that doesn't work, and they'll just send it to me, and I'll take it apart and work out whether it's, sometimes it might just be a dry solder joint. Other times the whole coil needs to be rewound.
And if somebody were to say that a rewound pickup isn't the same pickup. So I'm just curious what you think if I have let's just say I'm a millionaire and I have a 1959 Gibson Les Paul PAF, but it doesn't work. And I send it to you and you say it needs to be rewound. So when you rewind it, those thousands of turns of wire, it's different wire, it's new wire. So if somebody says, well, now the mojo's gone, it's not the same pickup, what would you say to that? I mean, I got to do something. If you want it to work, I've got to make it work, right?
Yeah. In the way I view things like that is it's all in the sound. So if you get that pickup rewound and the mojo's in the tone when you play it, then it's fine. The pickup's great. Okay, it's been rewound. Okay. Things break. Things break over time. And if they're broke, you do need to fix them.
Right. So if any of our listeners are thinking, hey, this resistance pickup sounds great, I want to place an order, what's your general turnaround time for a typical order? Just so people can get a sense of that before they place an order.
I normally say 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks to make a set of pickups, yeah. Purely because I'll have other things on. So for instance, this week I was refretting and if someone said, "Oh, can I order a pickup?" I can't stock the refret to make a pickup. Next week, I'm making pickups. I could probably add it. I'll be at the desk, making pickups. So it'll probably be a bit quicker if someone ordered next week. So
okay,
it just depends. But yeah, I say 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay. And do you ship worldwide? If a customer called from Japan or San Francisco,
yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And for any of our listeners who want to learn more about resistance pickups or they're ready to start their next dream guitar project, is resistancepickups.co.uk the best place to start? Is everything they need there?
Yeah, definitely to order pickups. So I'm working on doing a blog on there. So I've got a blog. I've only done one entry onto it, so I'll keep kind of building that up.
Okay.
Or the Facebook page.
Facebook page. Okay.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I've actually had quite a few people just ask me about wiring, just randomly. So I'll get a message and it will be, someone who maybe like a friend on the Facebook page, but someone I've never spoken to in real life saying, I'm wiring in this pickup and I can't get it to work. And, if people do that, I don't mind getting back to them and saying, you need to do this or that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm not going to be asking you for a lot of free advice. So before we go, I have one more question I need to ask you. As a guitarist, each day when you plug in, what kind of guitar do you reach for? What pedal do you play through? And what amplifier do you use?
Oh, I'm a proper gearhead with a bad case of gas. So that's a loaded question because I've got a couple of amps, and in my brain I want to be a minimalist, and I want to have one test guitar, and I want to have 2 stage guitars. I want to have a Les Paul and a Strat. But in reality, I play a lot of slide guitar, and I play a lot in altered tunings. Even for the metal stuff. So I actually do need a couple of guitars, and then the gas comes in and it justifies having a spare for each one of those. And then,
even in your metal band, you play slide and you play alternate tunings.
Yeah, we play in alternate tunings. Not too much slide going on in the band. Hopefully there will be with the new stuff. But yeah, okay. we use a lot of weird tunings, and a lot of the time we'll actually all be in different tunings. Okay, which is cool, which sounds good. But for me, today I was playing my Strat, so I just picked up a USA standard it's actually got Seymour Duncan's and the original USA pickups, and it's been modded so it's got a push. So it splits the Seymour Duncan humbucker to a single coil. So I'm going to take those out, put my own pickups in. Okay. But at the moment, I'm digging the Strats. That's what I'm digging. But I'll reach for a Les Paul when I do the alternate tunings. Okay. Because they're a bit more stable there.
So you find it a little bit easier to do alternate tunings on a Les Paul because it's a little more heft to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on the tuning though. If it's a really low tuning, then Strats they're a little bit more stable.
Okay.
If you've got the bridge blocked off, or if you've got a tremolo in the back.
Yep.
Just because the scale length is longer, so they handle that lower tuning with a bit more stability.
Okay.
But pedal wise, for Blind River pedal wise, I just use a tube screamer and a tuner.
Wow.
And that's it.
That's
and,
it.
And for Blind River, I use a Les Paul and a Strat.
Okay.
In fact, I've been gigging a Squire Strat recently, a Japanese Squire.
Playing out live with it.
Yeah, and that's been great. But now I've got the USA one. I think I might move the Squire on.
But it's something that I've read a few times, is people saying, one of the popular questions is, can you gig with a Squire? And I think you just answered it. I mean, you take one on stage with you.
Yeah, you definitely can. And I don't think anyone would ever notice. And I think that about even like the cheaper bass models, as long as you change the pickups.
Well, I was going to say, is that the thing with a Squire where it's like, it's a heck of a deal. It's not a bad instrument, but you got to change your pickups. Yeah.
In fact, this is something the listeners can't see this, but this is a scratch plate from one of my Japanese Squires.
Okay.
And it's got the pickups with the ceramic bar, single coils with a ceramic bar, right?
Yeah.
And everyone says these are awful, right? This sounds awesome. Like in the guitar, it sounds ridiculous. So I even think, cheap pickups have their place. They sound good. They can sound filthy. They can sound lo-fi. Stick a fuzz pedal in front of it and it sounds great anyway. So
I'm glad you said that, because I honestly can say there's been a few times in my life. I actually did a session once with like a $10 pickup and it sounded great. I mean, it's just, I think, yes, better pickups usually consistently sound better than really cheap pickups, but you never really know till you wire one up. Sometimes they sound pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I see that big barb magnet on the bottom of a single coil, I feel like that's a dead giveaway. Like, this is a cheapo, but you never know, right?
Well, I'm actually going to make some that mimic those, but I'm going to make them with high quality components and see if they're any good. That's something I've been wanting. That's why I've got it up here, because I'm trying to find what magnet I could replace that cheap bar magnet with that would give a fat tone. But talking of amps, currently I'm using a Matrix amp, which is a Matrix BB800, who I've got an endorsement with, and that's like if anyone's listening, it's like a mini. It's not quite a lunchbox head. It's actually a solid state power amp with a valve preamp. And the pure reason I'm using that is that if you gig and you need to get the train, or you need to keep the weight down, in a vehicle, then, because like you get stopped and fined for that in the UK and Europe a lot. So if you
get fined for the weight, you said, of your vehicle.
Yeah, if a tour vehicle's overweight. So if you've got like a van and you've got 5 or 6 guys in it, and then you've got all of the gear in the van as well. So you've got your Marshall heads, you've got your flight cases, you've got the drums, and then all the musicians are in there. You've got a couple of crew members in there. That vehicle's going to be overweight. And I've been pulled over several times by the traffic police for it.
Wow.
So sometimes you have to reduce the weight. And one of the best ways to do that is with a lightweight head.
So this Matrix head is a particularly light one?
Yeah, it's like 1 kilogram.
But you mentioned it has a tube preamp, right?
Yeah.
And it's still not very heavy?
It's not heavy at all. No.
Wow.
It's light. It's ridiculous when you pick it up.
Wow, it sounds like kind of comparable to like what Quilter's been doing.
It is, yeah, but it's lighter than the Quilter. It's more like a Mark bass. It's like a Mark bass for guitar.
Wow. Because, Mark bass is ridiculous too. They're like a feather.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know if you could make an amp lighter than a Quilter.
Oh man, it's ridiculous. And when you both Dan and myself both use them, you're hard pushed to tell the difference between that and JCM 800. You really are. Wow. Close mic'd, if you back to back the two, you'll hear a bit of difference because obviously they're different amps. But live, you'd never be able to tell. I
Mm.
mean, they're rock. So I'm going to play like huge gigs with this tiny solid state power amp, valve preamp head, and a Squire Strat, and no one's been able to tell. So
I think that's great, man. You know, Chris, the only problem when I start talking to you is I feel like, you know, I cannot stop because I go off on these threads with you that can go in 90 different directions, and it's hard to rein it in. I feel bad that we've run out of time, but I hope you'll promise me that you'll come back and we can keep going, because there's I still have 30 things I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Podcast today, and we didn't even get to. So just promise me we'll get to have you back sometime.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for making time for us today. I really appreciate it. It was great to do a deep dive into resistance pickups and learn a little bit more about your background, especially a lot of stuff I didn't know about your experience as a guitar technician. So that was great.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. It's always good to chat as well, but it's dangerous because it's like, you know, you get into anything, you know, especially with music, you know, it's like, you know, I just talk for hours.
Exactly. But it's a good problem. So once again, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we will see you soon.
Excellent. Cheers, man. Take care.
All right.
You've been listening to the Humbucker Soup Podcast with Kevin Chisholm, produced by Jay Sosnicki, music and audio production by Tyler Connaghan. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Humbucker Soup.